As the last remnants of daylight fade from the sky, the village of Ashwood is bathed in a soft, eerie twilight, the shadows cast by the trees growing longer and darker, like skeletal fingers reaching out to reclaim the land. It's a time of day when the air is heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, and the silence is only broken by the distant hooting of owls, their mournful cries echoing through the stillness. You would have heard the sound of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves as the wind stirs, but otherwise the village is quiet, the inhabitants retreated to their homes, waiting for the darkness to pass. I always come back to this one, the story of the villagers who would reopen the graves at night, their motivations shrouded in mystery, their actions a testament to the enduring power of superstition and fear. In the 17th and 18th centuries, in villages like Ashwood, it was not uncommon for the locals to exhume the bodies of those who had died under suspicious circumstances, or those who were believed to be cursed or worse, undead. The villagers would gather at the local cemetery, their lanterns casting flickering shadows on the ground. As they carefully dug up the graves, their hearts filled with a mix of fear and trepidation. The practice, known as revenant hunting, was a desperate attempt to protect the living from the perceived threat of the dead, to prevent the spirits of the departed from rising and exacting revenge on the living. The villagers believed that by reopening the graves, they could release the trapped spirits, allowing them to finally rest in peace and freeing the village from the grip of darkness and terror. As the night wears on, the shadows deepening, the villagers would perform their dark ritual, their whispers and murmurs carried away by the wind, leaving behind only the faint scent of decay and the faint rustle of leaves. The darkness closes in, and the village is left to face the shadows that stir at dusk. As the darkness deepens and the village slumbers, I always come back to this one, the quiet hours when the living relinquish their claim on the day, and the dead are left to their eternal rest. But in certain rural towns, particularly in medieval Europe, there existed a macabre custom that would see the villagers venture out into the night, their lanterns casting flickering shadows on the ground as they made their way to the local graveyard. The air would be heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, the silence broken only by the soft crunch of gravel beneath their feet. You would have heard the sound of pickaxes striking the ground, the murmur of hushed conversations as the villagers gathered around a grave, their faces illuminated only by the faint moonlight. It was a practice known as exhumation or reopening the grave, where the villagers would, under the cover of darkness, unearth the coffins of their recently deceased loved ones. The reasons behind this custom were varied, but often it was driven by a desire to ensure that the deceased had indeed passed on and not fallen victim to premature burial, a fear that was not entirely unfounded in an era where medical understanding was limited. In some instances, it was also believed that the spirit of the deceased could be calmed or even freed by this nocturnal ritual. As I ponder the motivations behind this practice, I am drawn to the town of Menton in southeastern France, where this custom was particularly prevalent during the 17th and 18th centuries. The villagers of Menton would, on certain nights, reopen the graves of their loved ones, often to perform a ritual known as the second funeral, where they would rebury the deceased, this time with the proper rites and ceremonies, in the hopes of bringing peace to the restless spirit. It was a somber and quiet affair, with the villagers moving with reverence, their footsteps slow and deliberate as they worked to uncover the truth and find solace in the darkness. The sound of the pickaxes would grow fainter, the murmur of conversations would cease, and the only sound would be the soft rustling of the wind through the trees, as the villagers stood in silence, surrounded by the remnants of the dead. And as the night wore on, the shadows would grow longer, the darkness would deepen, and the villagers would, one by one, return to their homes, leaving the dead to their rest, and the darkness to its quiet reign. In the stillness of the night, when darkness shrouded the village, a sense of restlessness settled over the residents, their minds consumed by the weight of death and the bodies that lay just beneath their feet. It was a time when the living were drawn to the dead, their footsteps quiet on the dirt paths that wound through the village, leading them to the graves that held their loved ones. You would have heard the soft rustling of leaves, the creaking of trees, as if the very earth itself was shifting, surrendering its secrets to those who sought them. As I sit here, reflecting on this chapter of history, I always come back to this one, the way the villagers' actions seem to defy the natural order, their need to reconnect with the departed driving them to disturb the rest of the dead. The practice, known as exhumation or disinterment, was not unique to this village, but the frequency and the reasons behind it were. It was as if the villagers believed that by reopening the graves, they could somehow re-establish a connection with the deceased, reassure themselves that the body was still present, still a part of their world. In the 18th century, in the rural villages of Europe, this practice was more common than one might think, a testament to the complex, often fraught relationship between the living and the dead. The villagers would gather at night, their lanterns casting flickering shadows on the ground, as they carefully uncovered the graves, their hands moving with a mix of reverence and trepidation. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, a potent reminder of the transience of life. And yet, in this darkness, there was a sense of comfort, a feeling that the villagers were not alone, that the dead was still with them, watching over them. The reasons behind this practice were varied, but at its core, it was a manifestation of the villagers' deep-seated fear of being forgotten, of being left behind. By reopening the graves, they were, in a way, ensuring that the dead remained a part of their lives, their memories kept alive through this macabre ritual. As the night wore on, the villagers would cover the graves once more, their footsteps fading into the darkness, leaving behind a sense of unease, a feeling that the rest of the dead was never truly secure. As the last remnants of sunlight faded from the sky, the villagers would often gather at the local cemetery, their footsteps quiet on the dew-kissed grass, the only sound being the soft rustling of leaves in the gentle night breeze. You would have heard the distant hooting of owls, the creaking of trees, and the faint murmur of voices, all blending together to create an eerie yet mesmerizing atmosphere. It was a time when the living and the dead seemed to coexist, if only for a brief moment, as the villagers went about their nocturnal ritual, one that was as fascinating as it was unsettling. In the rural landscapes of 18th century Europe, particularly in the countryside of England and Ireland, it was not uncommon for graves to be reopened at night, a practice that may seem morbid to us now, but was then a necessary act, driven by a desire to understand the mysteries of death and the afterlife. I always come back to this one, the way the villagers would carefully uncover the coffins, their faces illuminated only by the faint moonlight as they searched for signs of something, anything that could explain the unexplainable. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, a potent reminder of the transience of life. As the night wore on, the villagers would gather around the graves, their whispers and murmurs carried away by the wind, leaving behind an unsettling sense of unease, a feeling that lingered long after they had returned to their homes, the darkness of the night swallowing everything in its path. The graves, once reopened, seemed to yawn open, like mouths devoid of sound, revealing the secrets that lay within, secrets that were both captivating and terrifying. And it was in these moments, surrounded by the silence of the night, that the villagers would attempt to make sense of the unknown, to find answers to questions that had haunted them for centuries. The darkness was almost palpable, a living, breathing entity that wrapped itself around the villagers, holding them in its grasp as they delved into the mysteries of the afterlife. As the darkness gathers and the village sleeps, the shadows cast by the moonlight seem to stir with a life of their own, whispering tales of the restless dead. In medieval Europe, a peculiar and haunting custom emerged, one that speaks to the enduring power of superstition and the fear of the unknown. It was a time when the distinction between life and death was often blurred, and the living sought to communicate with those who had passed on, to find solace in the idea that their loved ones still lingered, watching over them. In the dead of night, villagers would sneak out to the local cemetery, armed with shovels and a deep-seated desire to uncover the secrets that lay beneath the earth. You would have heard the soft crunch of gravel beneath their feet, the creaking of wooden gates as they made their way to the graves of their ancestors. I always come back to this one, the story of the villagers who reopened the graves at night, driven by a morbid curiosity and a desperate need to understand the mysteries of the afterlife. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay as they carefully exhumed the remains, searching for signs of something, anything that might explain the unexplained. It was a ritual that spoke to the darkest corners of the human psyche, a testament to the enduring power of fear and uncertainty. The silence of the night was broken only by the sound of shovels scraping against the dirt, and the faint whisper of prayers as the villagers sought to conjure forth the spirits of the dead. As the night wore on, the villagers would gather around the reopened graves, their faces illuminated only by the faint moonlight, their eyes filled with a mix of fear and fascination. They would speak in hushed tones, sharing tales of the deceased and the lives they had lived, as if the act of remembering might somehow keep the dead from truly departing. It was a fragile attempt to bridge the chasm between the world of the living and the world of the dead, a desperate attempt to find meaning in the darkness that lay beyond. And as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the villagers would carefully rebury the remains, leaving behind only the faintest hint of their nocturnal ritual, a whispered promise to return, to continue the conversation with the restless dead. The darkness would slowly recede as the village came back to life, but the echoes of the unquiet bones would linger, a haunting reminder of the secrets that lay just beneath the surface. As the last remnants of sunlight faded from the village, a sense of unease settled over the thatched roofs and the fields that lay beyond, for it was in these hours of darkness that the villagers would stir, their footsteps quiet on the dirt paths that wound between the homes, their faces obscured by the shadows that danced upon the walls. You would have heard the soft murmur of whispers, the creaking of wooden gates, and the rustling of leaves as they made their way to the churchyard, a place where the living and the dead coexisted in an uneasy harmony. The villagers, driven by a desperate longing, would reopen the graves of their loved ones, a practice that had been passed down through generations, its origins lost in the mist of time. I always come back to this one, the way the darkness seemed to amplify their grief, as if the night itself was a catalyst for their sorrow. In the stillness of the night, the villagers would gently lift the earth, their hands moving with a reverence that belied the darkness of their task, and uncover the coffins, the wooden lids creaking as they were lifted, releasing the faint scent of decay and rot into the air. It was a ritual, a macabre waltz, where the living and the dead moved in tandem, bound by a shared history and a deep-seated need to reconnect with those who had passed on. The villagers believed that by reopening the graves, they could communicate with the departed, seek their guidance, and find solace in their presence, a presence that seemed to linger, a faint whisper on the wind. As the night wore on, the villagers would sit beside the open graves, their faces illuminated only by the faint moonlight that filtered through the trees, casting an ethereal glow over the scene, a glow that seemed to underscore the gravity of their actions. They would talk to the dead, sharing their joys and sorrows, their hopes and fears, their voices barely above a whisper, as if they feared waking the rest of the village, or perhaps the dead themselves. The darkness seemed to amplify their emotions, as if the night was a vessel, a container for their grief, and in this way they found a sense of peace, a sense of connection to those who had gone before. And when the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the villagers would carefully cover the graves once more, their footsteps quiet as they returned to their homes, the darkness slowly receding, leaving behind a sense of calm, a sense of resolution, as if the night had somehow healed their wounds. In the depths of rural Europe, where the moon dipped into the darkness of the forest, there existed a tradition so shrouded in mystery. It's a wonder the whispers of it have survived to this day. You would have heard the villagers speak of it in hushed tones, their voices barely audible over the crackling of the fire. As they recounted the nights, they reopened the graves of their loved ones. It's a practice that's hard to fathom, and yet it was a ritual they undertook with a mix of reverence and trepidation. I always come back to this one, the way the living would dare to disturb the rest of the dead, driven by a desire to reconnect with those who had passed on. The custom, known as exhumation or reopening of the graves, was most prevalent in the rural areas of Eastern Europe, particularly in what is now modern-day Romania and Bulgaria. It was a time when the living would gather at the local cemetery, usually under the cover of night, to uncover the coffins of their deceased family members and friends. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay as they carefully lifted the lids, revealing the remains within. It was a somber and quiet affair, with the only sound being the soft murmur of prayers and the creaking of the wooden coffins. As the night wore on, the villagers would often leave offerings, such as food, drink, or clothing, beside the graves, in the hopes of appeasing the spirits of the dead. They believed that by doing so, they could maintain a connection with their loved ones, and perhaps even seek their guidance or protection. The practice was not without its risks, however, as the villagers believed that the spirits of the dead could be mischievous or even malevolent if not treated with the proper respect. And so they would approach the graves with caution, their hearts filled with a mix of longing and trepidation. The darkness of the night seemed to press in around them, as they stood at the threshold between the world of the living and the world of the dead. As the darkness falls and the village sleeps, the wind whispers secrets through the trees, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and decay, a reminder of the graves that lie hidden beneath the silent hills. You would have heard the stories, passed down through generations, of villagers who, under the cover of night, would reopen the graves of their loved ones, not to desecrate, but to revisit, to reconnect with the souls they had lost. It's a practice that may seem macabre to some, but to those who lived in these rural communities, it was a way to cope with grief, to find solace in the presence of the departed. I always come back to this one, the story of a young woman who, every year on the anniversary of her husband's death, would sneak out to the graveyard and reopen his grave just to sit with him, to talk to him, to feel his presence once more. The custom, known as grave reopening or exhumation, was not unique to one region, but was practiced in various forms across Europe, particularly in the 18th and 19th centuries. It was a time when death was a part of everyday life, and the living were not so far removed from the dead. The villagers believed that the souls of the departed lingered, that they could still be reached, still be communicated with. And so they would reopen the graves to leave gifts, to say prayers, to seek guidance, or simply to be near their loved ones once more. As the night wears on and the stars twinkle above, the shadows cast by the gravestones seem to grow longer, as if the darkness itself is trying to reclaim the secrets that lie within. The wind stirs and the trees creak, a soft, mournful sound that echoes through the empty streets, a reminder that even in death, there is still a connection, a thread that binds us to those who have gone before. And as you drift off to sleep, the silence of the night, the stillness of the graves, and the whispers of the wind all blend together to create a sense of peace, a sense of closure, a sense of being part of something much larger than ourselves. The darkness closes in, a soft, gentle blanket, and the world slows down just for a moment to remember the forgotten souls who lie hidden but not forgotten in the wake of time.